So you're here today for Intro to Startup Ideas and or to Startup Testing, excuse me. And this workshop is brought to you by StartupSac. StartupSac is a nonprofit in the greater Sacramento region that helps entrepreneurs be successful. And I'll drop a link for StartupSac in the chat in a minute. We, as a nonprofit, we are sponsored by various businesses in the greater Sacramento region. And I just want to take a minute to acknowledge them and thank them. They are SMUD, Witten Law, Bender Insurance Solutions, Stoll Reeves, Weintraub Tobin, Moneta Ventures, Holcomb Law Group, Clifton Larson Allen, Digitally Driven, 3 Steps Forward, and Ernst and Young. And then I just want to play a real quick video from SMUD.
At SMUD, we're committed to zero carbon by 2030. We're creating more energy from renewable resources, reconfiguring our power plants to improve air quality, electrifying our fleet, greening our buildings, and accelerating clean energy with our first grid-scale battery farm. The Clean Power City movement is happening. For 37 ways you can join the charge, visit cleanpowercity.org.
All right, and now we'll, whoops, I always hit share instead of slideshow. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and get started with our workshop. I want to introduce you to Dan Casas-Murray. He already introduced himself a little bit, but Dan is known here locally as the Lean Innovator. He is an advisor for the MetroBusiness Center and also a 1 Million Cups Sacramento organizer. So Dan, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Looks like I'm on now. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dan Casas-Murray. I'm going to be the person talking, at least for part of it. So let's just talk about what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so really what we want to do today is talk about testing. Like, the idea is that there's so much uncertainty around startups. There's so much uncertainty around business, and the idea is, well, okay, can we mitigate some of that uncertainty? Like, can we just get rid of some of those variables, like, from the very beginning? And it turns out that the answer is yes. And I feel like now we're able to do that a lot easier than we were maybe 10, 20 years ago, because of, connectivity, right? There's answers to our questions. And so I'm basically going to share with you a way to think about testing, a way to think about mitigating those uncertainties. And that's really what we're here for today. So our objectives today are to learn how to basically just a way of thinking in order to like how to mitigate those uncertainties, how to do it cheaply, without spending a lot of time or effort or money and all that. And I'm going to say that there's a lot of different ways to test. And so I've kind of come up with a way to organize it all, to make it say, test this first, then test that, then test that. So that way, you don't lose a bunch of brain cells like I have during the whole thing. And then after that, we're going to actually design a sample test. And so basically at the end of the session, what you should be able to do is leave it with basically just a formula that can help you just reduce risk incrementally as you go along. And I'm going to give you a couple tools and resources. Some of them you may have seen, maybe some of them you haven't, but take what you can and leave the rest, basically. And then how we're going to actually do that is this is how we'll navigate all of that. So there'll be 3 portions to what we talk about. We're going to talk about uncertainties and testing first. Then we'll talk about that hierarchy that I mentioned, and then we'll go into the execution of how a test is actually set up. Okay, so As we go through some of these things, what I'd like you to do in order to get the most out of like, oh, let me stop sharing real quick so I can talk to you. What I'd like you to do is have in your mind one or two things. Either one, a startup project that you're currently working on, or you can look at a startup project that you have worked on in the past that maybe didn't work out so well or did work out well. Either way. So we're either referencing a current project or we're going to reference a project like that we've done in the past. And that will help to provide some mental framework, like a mental reference around what we're talking about today. Okay? All right. I see people still listening, so that's a good sign. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to share my screen and let's just get into the uncertainty portion. What I'd like you to do is meet my friend Mike. Mike worked at a technology company, and then he made an app, and then he put it in the App Store. It was successful, and then after that he was like, I want to do this again. And so after that he talked to a few customers, and he's now on his second startup project, and he finally found out what that value proposition was going to be with customer interviews and all that other kind of stuff. So he basically said, okay, I think I'm going to get to work now. So he puts together this wireframe, right? And he shows all his potential customers everything that he was working on, and the demo just goes bad. Like he shows people, hey, you click on this little button and you do this little thing, and over here, and everybody's just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, no, this isn't landing with me. It's not resonating. And Mike's like, yo, that sucks. I don't know about anybody else, but I've been in this situation and it hurts your heart, man. It really hurts your heart. The great thing is it's not the end of the world. But it's a little humbling. And so basically what we're dealing with, anytime that I do something new, I'm always like, oh man, I don't know how this is going to land. And I better not just build the whole thing all at once before I actually start doing it. So I want to get rid of some of those uncertainties that I have up front so I can avoid this thing right there, because that's hella embarrassing. Okay, so Mike doesn't know how to do any of this, but he's not above asking for help, which is great. Something that he can do at this in the startup ecosystem at Sacramento. So he calls up his friend Beth. Beth has been in startup land for a while, and she's navigated, and she's got a successful startup. So he's like, Beth, can you tell me, like, what are some of those things that you can do to like just mitigate uncertainties out of the gate? Like, did you know what you were going to do right away? She's like, look, no, none of us know. She's like, look at this. You see this vision? I was going to build this like awesome thing for my customers, and it was going to be dope. And it was going to be like game changing and world changing. And it was going to be utopia, because, right. That's, as founders, I don't know about y'all, but I still have like a couple of passion projects out there that are like, they're going to change the world and everybody needs to know how to do it. Right. Okay. It doesn't work like that. Right. She's like, okay, that was the vision. And this is what I actually had the money for. So I had to like figure out like, how am I going to actually make something that's going to be worthwhile? She's like, but she's like, I just got to get started. So this is what she does. She puts together a prototype, and that's what it looks like. It doesn't, it's kind of an approximation, right? And she's like, well, this isn't really working out because I don't know what I'm doing. And she's like, let me outsource this. And so this is what it comes back with, like even worse. And then she's like, I got to figure out like, okay, I took the first thing and the second thing, and let me try to make the third thing. And so that's what it looks like when she tried to do it herself. And then she actually gets a version out the door, and she ships, and that's what it looks like. Not too great, but not really functional, but maybe it's an approximation, or that kind of thing. And finally, after years of messing around with this and years of like, building things and thinking it's going to be the right thing, she finally understands that really all along this is what her customers wanted. So there's a big difference, right? She's like, I had this vision, and the customer actually just wanted something a lot simpler than that. And Mike was like, how many years did you spend on that? She's like, at least 2 or 3. And he's like, I don't have that kind of runway, first of all. Second of all, I don't have enough money to like actually go through all those iterations. And she's like, yeah, I didn't either. And oh, by the way, I want to help you avoid all that, because that was like really painful. And he's like, that's cool. I'm sold. And how do I do that? She's like, well, you have to always be testing. And he's like, well, okay, that makes sense. And he's like, well, but what is a test? Like, how do I test? And I mean, I get the concept, but how do I test for something that's not even built yet? And so Beth says, look, it's all about running simulations of what an experience might look like for your customers. Little tiny simulations. And then you string those simulations together, and eventually you have something called a minimum viable product. Eventually you have like a prototype for a service or a piece of hardware or software. And it doesn't look great, but it does the thing that it needs to do. And basically the idea, she says, is if you have these like little simulations, you see if it's going to work between, like, technically, is it going to work? And is it going to work for the customer at the same time? Like, both of those things have to be in confluence, right? And so if you have those at each step of the way, then eventually you can get to the thing. And he's like, okay, I'm starting to understand this a little bit. He's like, but still, do I build stuff or do I ask people if they're going to use something? And she's like, no, don't ask people if they're going to use it, if they would hypothetically do a thing. Don't test like that. You want to test with behavior. You want to get indications of a person's likelihood to actually use a thing by putting a simulation of that thing in front of them, even if it's even if it's software, even if it's service. We want to simulate all that. And we want to watch somebody interacting with that thing, right? And that's actually a test. And that's how we observe behavior. And that's how we get those simulations together to string them together to make a thing eventually. He's like, okay. She's like, look, think about it like this. Think about these questions right here. So you have your app that you're going to make. And Mike says, yeah. And she's like, okay, well, what are you really uncertain about? And he's like, well, really, I just don't know if, like, my customer said that she wanted this, but I don't know if she really wants it. Like, I don't know how to prove that. I don't even know what she thinks of it. And like, maybe she is being nice and she's telling me that, yeah, of course I'll buy it. Of course I'll look at it. I'll share it with my friends, like all that stuff. But does she really want to? Mike doesn't know. And no amount of her actually telling him is actually going to give him that kind of information, right? Especially when his runway is shrinking and he doesn't have enough money to keep going at some point, right? He needs to know legitimately. The other thing he doesn't know is like, well, how does, like, even if she did want it and she did see it, like, how, like, before he actually puts it on a shelf somewhere, either a virtual shelf or the shelf at a store, how does he know she'll actually buy it, like, without him like asking her about it or telling her about it? He doesn't know that either. And then the other thing is, let's say that she does really think it's great. Let's say that she does buy it. Like, how does he know that it's actually going to be useful for her? He doesn't. And a lot of us, I feel, are in the same boat. We just don't. But like, up until now, I feel, I'm going to stop sharing for a second here. So I can level with y'all. Up until now, I feel like it's been like, well, how do you figure these questions out? How do you mitigate all this? And the traditional answer is, well, you just do it and you go and you figure it out as you go. Cool. Yeah, sure. That's a technique. Not the only technique. There's other techniques that we can employ. And that is this idea of simulating a business case, like, as we kind of go, like, pray and spray, right? Yes, exactly. Like, just putting it out there and seeing. So basically what we want to say is, okay, well, how do we do this without building a thing and committing a bunch of time, money, and other resources? And how do we do that? So the first thing that I like to do is, so the answer is yes, we can do that. I'm going to show you how to do that later. What I want us to do right now is kind of level set for ourselves and say, okay, well, the first thing that we got to know is what we're uncertain about. Like, what are those risks that we're getting ready to take? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again because I would like to queue it up for an exercise that I'd like us to do. This is the first portion. We'll have 2 more portions after this one, but here's the basic idea. Think of that project that you're working on again, or a project that you have worked on in the past, And imagine that like you're not at launch yet. Imagine that you still have a few steps to go before you actually launch. Now, what I want to know is what are some of those uncertainties that are stopping you from launching right now? I mean, yeah, you could say, well, I don't have the platform up. I don't have the right equipment and stuff like that. But think about, kind of going back to these questions right here are these some of the uncertainties that you have? What do those look like specifically for you? So let's take, well, first of all, here, I'm gonna take this text here, and it seems that I cannot type and do two things at once. So feel free to take a screenshot of this right now, please. This is basically what we're going to work on for the next about 10 minutes. Okay for me to stop sharing? Yeah, okay, I see some nodding. Great. Okay, so what I'd like us to do is an exercise. So what I have planned for this is a breakout room. But you don't have to do a breakout room if you don't want to, because, I know it could be a little weird. But it's cool if it's not weird. So let me ask you this. Basically, the way it would go is if you think of that project, and we're going to talk with a partner just to talk it out, right? That's basically the idea. Talk it out. What are some of those things that are stopping you from launching right now? What are those uncertainties? We're going to identify those. If you'd like to, so we'll do that for like 5 minutes each, right? So one person talk about it for 5 minutes and the other person talk about it for another 5. If you would like to be in a breakout room to do that with a partner, can you raise your hand right now? Okay, we have, okay, keep your hands raised, please, so that we can see. Okay,
So your Zoom hand, if you could raise your Zoom hand, which you'll find in the reactions menu, then it'll stay up and you can put your arm down.
Great. We've got Melissa, we've got Leslie, we've got Justin, we have Alan, Ravi, Patrick, and Sri. Oh, and then Nick. Okay. All right. Okay, good. So, Laura, how do you feel?
Let me see. How many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
If you need to make it even, I can.
7, 8.
I can join. Okay, you're first.
Yeah, we're good. Thanks.
You're good.
Thanks, Anthony.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to need
4
breakout rooms. All right. Let me see how this works. Oh, this is an experiment. Okay. So Justin and Kelsey. Then
Oh, wait, Kelsey doesn't have her hand up though.
oh, she doesn't.
Yeah.
Shoot. It's harder than I thought.
Thanks for bearing with us, everyone. Appreciate this.
Crap. Let me start over. Let's see. Well, I'll just add another person to, maybe I should just have you tell me the name. So I'm starting with Justin.
Uh-huh.
And so tell me one other person.
Okay, so let's put Justin and Sri together.
Okay. Okay.
And then Leslie and Ravi.
Let's see, Robbie.
Okay.
Oh, there he is. Okay. All right.
And then Melissa and Alan.
Okay.
And then Nick and Patrick.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Thanks for your patience, everyone. This is cool. All right.
Yeah. And Kelsey, you can just ignore the invite.
All right, so let's see. I want to type a message to everyone. We'll just do like, we'll start 5 minutes, the first person, and then
Okay. Let's see if I can actually, you know how to do that so that the breakout rooms get it. Let's see. Broadcast message to all.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you doing that or I'll do it?
I can.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So Kelsey and Anthony, after Dan gives the messages there, I believe he's going to give you the opportunity to discuss it in this main group.
Yeah. Okay, so we're good. Everything is unterwegs.
So good.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I guess now we can think about a project, and I'm curious to see what kind of uncertainties everybody has here.
Yeah, all right, I can start. So I've been working on a project that I had built, and it's already released. But I was thinking more like what could be different. I mean, there is actually requires like relaunching and stuff always, right? So for me, the biggest uncertainty is we actually build this product, spent probably like 100 engineers on it, which is a lot, and for many reasons why it got that big. But then HP Hewlett Packard is using it, so we licensed to Hewlett Packard, so we had a great enterprise revenue stream. But we seem to be having challenges getting out of the HP, right? So it's one of those, maybe we built it for one customer and only one customer really needs it because of that. But other customers are interested, but they just don't want to pay the price that HP is paying, right? And so do I need to change my pricing scheme? Do I need to then retest it now with more different kind of, markets and customers, right? And then come up with a pricing scheme that still keeps my HP folks say, hey, you ripped us off because now you're pricing it small. Like, how do you price differentiate where you're not pissing off the current customer, but yet price it within reach for the other customers, right? So that's kind of the uncertainty I'm facing right now. Is like, do I have a product that's only for the enterprise? Can I bring it down market? Can I price it accordingly where it won't piss off my current customer, but yet make it affordable for my low-end customers? So those kind of things, and like looking for those differentiating factors that can bring it down to more of a small business type.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a conundrum.
Yeah, and in addition, the support for this software is the same whether I'm supporting HP who's paying a lot versus somebody who's paying almost nothing, right? So now I'm thinking also support, like by picking up a whole bunch of small customers, I also have to increase my support team, but at the end it might not be profitable because they're not paying the price that's required to add support. So that's tough.
Yeah, it sounds to me, at least what I heard, Anthony, was that there's some there's some uncertainty around like value proposition for a particular customer segment.
Yeah.
There's because that drives the product, but then how it shows up and then pricing and the differentiation. I mean, I feel like it's a reasonable assumption to say that like the product or the service is different for customers than it is for the enterprise customer.
Yeah.
It's gotta be, right? Like
it is, right? And then if you look at like the Quicken diagrams, like what features do you cut out? So like we actually built an enterprise product first, and now we're trying to cut features out to make it into small medium business, instead of the other way. Usually people like have an MVP and then build out, but our first customer was this big whale, and so we had to satisfy all their needs, and now we're figuring out how to trim things out. So it's like almost backwards, right? Because we have funding for that. And that's why we became 100 engineers, because HP is like, we want all these features now, right? And so it's just like a total opposite of what a startup would do, which is you probably have an MVP and, so I'm trying to go backwards. I got like the perfect product, and now I need to trim it down to an MVP to sell it at a cheaper price, if you will.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. In fact, part of my problem has been in deliver like teaching these things, right? You know, I read the lean books and I spent some time in the U.S. Army as an officer, so I was all about like I understood like enterprise organization, all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, not in enterprise. I was in staff and Army, but I mean, it's similar with big organizations,
Right.
and a lot of these concepts in the lean books, they're high level.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden I find myself in a place where I'm like needing to distill it in a way that's like bite size for people that don't necessarily have that institutional context.
That's right.
And that's hard. That's hard.
Yeah, once you build it, you think everything's valuable, right? And that's why you build it. And then now you're trying to say, okay, what do people really need to have or need to know? So
yeah.
No, I could relate for sure.
Okay, give me a quick second here. I would like
Yeah.
to the breakout rooms. I'm going to say, okay, folks, time to switch. Okay.
Oh, you're on mute, Laura.
I want you to see my earpods, thanks to you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm so glad. Laura and I were in a call one time, and then she was breaking up with her current headset. It's like, Laura, I'm going to buy you some AirPods.
That's awesome.
Because what you do is too important to have it broken up.
And I've gotten a new computer since then. I think the problem was actually with my
Computer.
where the thing plugs in, the connector.
Yeah, the connector.
Rather than the wire.
Yes.
So, but I have a new computer and Zoom works so much better. I got a Surface laptop and I'm quite pleased. Yeah. Kelsey, if you're interested, we invite you to answer the question as well. If there's a project you're working on and what are some of the uncertainties?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I am in the super, super infant stages of this entire process. And I actually am still going to school for something called Ayurveda, which is a philosophy around holistic wellness.
Oh, yeah.
Medicine. Yeah, totally. And then my sister also wants to introduce cedarwood saunas. And so that will be a product that we're offering, building cedarwood saunas. And so I'm still in school, still in the process of, a little ways away from launching an actual business. And so I suppose the uncertainties that are coming up first is just, will there be enough of a demand to support the business that we're trying to introduce?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty big uncertainty, I would say.
Yeah, totally. We think we have something that is desirable and can be of service and of benefit to people, and hopefully the community will respond accordingly.
So, okay, so Mike, can we unpack that a little bit? Like, how do you, yeah, so what, did you have other thoughts about that, Kelsey?
Not yet.
Cool. So, is there enough demand? I feel like we can unpack that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
So, would there be enough demand for what? Specifics.
To create a self-sustaining. I don't know.
This is good. No, we're stretching. So
right.
you're totally good. Okay, so like, how about I have an idea, and maybe this would help. We have basically, when you're talking about Ayurvedic things, right? You're talking like holistic wellness, and you're talking about mind, body, spirit, and a lot of work. Right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. What?
It can be challenging work. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so one of the things that comes to my mind is that it's a lot of work, but so beneficial. Like it so pays off. Like when you actually do the work, So maybe one of the questions that I would have is, hey, I've got this awesome like support system and guidance and all this other kind of stuff, but will people be interested in actually bettering themselves, like in a way that they have to commit to?
Right.
And that's kind of scary, right? Like that's
Yeah.
it. Is that along the lines of how you're feeling about it?
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah. Will people choose to commit to themselves and make the commitment to, yeah, utilizing what we're offering?
Do you feel like they would do it right away, or that they would need to like wade into the waters a little bit?
I think wading into the waters. And so that brings up an idea of creating a plan to introduce these practices and things incrementally to make it digestible for people as they start coming to us.
I mean, I totally love that, right? Because I mean, okay, so I don't do Ayurveda, but I have a wellness practice for myself, right?
Totally.
And I didn't start by saying, yo, I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna learn all this stuff, because I was like, I don't want to.
Right, right. Okay.
And I had to teach myself to, I had to teach myself to instill habits and stuff like that. And so of course I started with like the big ones, like, oh, I don't want to overeat. I want to eat healthy. I want, all the externals. And maybe I got some success with some of that. And that kind of inspired me to continue getting better. So I hear that some of the uncertainties that you have is, how can I introduce some of these things to people that I know they want to, but do they want to, but how do I get them in a way that like incrementally pulls them in?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question to brainstorm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right. So yeah, looks like we have those breakout rooms. They're going to close in about 60 seconds. All right. Now, if you guys wouldn't mind, just excuse me for a moment so I can look at the next slide. So, and then I'll do a quick time check. Okay. All right. I'm good now. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me.
Do you use multiple screens, Dan?
No, I have one laptop and that's it.
Yeah, me too. It makes it harder to do some of these things on Zoom.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Welcome back, Leslie. Welcome back, Ravi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me for eating my lunch. I've been back to back with webinars and meetings all morning long.
You're good. You're good. I can relate. All right, Sri, nice to see you again. What time is it? Oh, I can't hear you.
12:11.
Yeah, it's 12:41 a.m.
Oh.
Okay, all right. So not too terribly bad. So Sri's joining us from India. So a big round of applause for dedication right there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Life
All right,
of
folks.
the entrepreneur, right?
Making it happen. All right, so here's what we've got so far, everyone. In our room, what we had was a good opportunity to identify some of those things we just don't know about. And really, that was the point of the exercise, was to just identify it, right? Okay, now what we're going to talk about is, now that we have these things that we've identified, hopefully you've kind of like jotted it down in your project. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, how do I test some of those uncertainties? So we're gonna talk about something called the testing hierarchy. And so now I'm gonna share my screen now. And here's the idea. It's that we have like a bunch of different things that we're uncertain about, right? So how do we start unpacking that? How do we start thinking about it in a way that's like coherent? Because, you know, for me, I've tried to do this in the past and it's been like, what do I start testing and why and how and who? Oh, screw it. I'm just going to do it. Right. So let me introduce you to the testing hierarchy. Okay. So this diagram basically says you have the different levels, one through 5. Okay. It's not all inclusive, but this basically gets you to a really, really decent solution. And some of these tests are actually based on David Bland's library of testing. His book is called Testing Business Ideas. Great book. It can really flesh out some of these tests for you. But this is the idea. The idea is that there are certain things that we have to test before we're able to test other things. Right. And so that's why right here, there's it's sort of like pyramidical. Pyramidical. Did I just make that up? I think I might have made it hierarchical anyways. Right. So so that's the first thing that I wanted to mention about this. The second thing that I'd like to mention is an orientation to how things are kind of laid out in this hierarchy. So right here, we have messaging. The second one says channels. The third one says purchasing behavior. So in the center, we're having like categories of tests, or basically categories of things that we're testing, right? And so it kind of makes sense, right? It says, like, well, I can't test what media channels or where my marketing is going to go if I don't have the right marketing. And I can't test my purchasing behavior if I don't know, like, is my funnel actually working? If I don't know where to put the ads, and if I don't know where to put the ads, you know, so it kind of nests on top. So it goes messaging, channels, purchasing behavior, usability, and experience. I'll zoom into some of these as we go. But just as this is how it's organized. Now on the left-hand side are the types of tests that we can test for. So basically, if we're testing messaging, really what we want to do is we want to get our elevator pitch down pat. So how do we do that? We test, and there's a way to do that. The same thing for channels. Like, how do I know which channel I have? Once I have the messaging done, which channel do I actually put it in? So there's a way to test for those channels. And purchasing behavior, et cetera, right? So this on the left-hand side is all the mechanisms by which we test. On the right-hand side are examples of metrics that we can use to see whether or not those tests are producing actionable data, right? So in other words, so when we're doing messaging, we want to use these tests over here. And then we're actually looking for interest or accurate feedback or measurable feedback. So that's how this whole diagram works. So let's take a deep dive into each of these. The first thing that we want to test for is messaging. And when we talk about messaging, we want to say, hey, can I tell a customer or somebody else about my product in like 11 seconds without seeing an eye glaze, without seeing a squirrel? So not, I get that look sometimes, more often than I care to. That's okay, because, you know, we're people. Anyways, so the idea with messaging is it's beyond the scope of this course, or this particular class. But there's a way to craft your statement and your messaging to do that in 11 seconds. And that's what I like to call the product statement. I'm happy to talk more about any of these tests in detail at a different time. I just wanted to give you an overview, but it's possible to test your messaging with a 1-sentence pitch, and that's called a product statement. And the next thing that you can do with that message, if you want to test it, there's something that I like to, it's at the end there. It says tell and draw. It's basically like this. I tell somebody what my product statement is, 1 sentence about what it is that I do, and then I get them to draw it on a sticky note. And if they get it right, they get it right, right? If they get it right, then I know that I've got the right messaging for that particular person. But if they draw something totally off base, then I know that, that's not the right statement. And so it's a very, very easy, very, very quick way to test out like a product statement. Now, the other thing right there that you'll see is a 1-minute pitch. And the 1-minute pitch is literally like 60 seconds long. It includes the product statement, how it works, what the secret sauce is, and what the customer's problem looks like alleviated. And so the test for the 1-minute pitch is, do I get eyeballs throughout the whole thing? Or do they look away? Or do they ask me more at the end of it? Or if they're like, so the way I usually like to test the product statement is, once I know that I have it written down and people can like draw it out and I can see it, that it's my messaging is correct. If they're still interested, they'll say, tell me more, at which case I tell the 1-minute pitch. And if they're still interested after that, then I'll tell them the 5-minute pitch, right? So that's usually how I like to test the messaging. And I test this with people, like, face-to-face or on Zoom or something like that. And really what I'm looking for is that interest or that accurate feedback. So in the very beginning, if one of our uncertainties are, do we have the right people? Do we have the right value proposition? Do we have, is this going to work? Like I would always start with messaging and I would say, okay, well, do I have even the right message? Do I have the right value proposition? How do I test that? I test it with these things right here. And what am I looking for when I test? I'm looking for somebody to ask me more about it, or, I can see the interest in their eyes, or they give me the locked in, like, I want to know more type thing, right? So that's messaging. Did I hit the right button? Okay, so right button, right arrow key. So the next thing we'll talk about is channels. The messaging for me is the most important part, which is why I spent most of the time on it. So we'll spend progressively less time on each of these tests. These are just categories, right? And so what I'd like you to do as you're thinking about this, or as we're going through it, just think about which category applies to you. Okay, so channels are all about like your marketing channels, right? Like, so how are we actually going? Let's assume that we have the messaging correct at this point. Which places are we going to put the messages, and how do we know? Like, are we uncertain about, is this like something that I can do on Facebook, or is this something that I should be doing on LinkedIn? Or is this something that I should be doing at a trade show? Or is this something that I should be doing like in front of a live audience? That kind of stuff, right? And so these are the mechanisms. Now, there's a book and it's called Traction, and it's by a person named Gabriel Weinberg. Now there's two books called Traction. One is an orange and gray one, and the other one is a blue and a blue and a red one. You want the blue and the red one, by Gabriel Weinberg. Basically what he does is he lays out 19 of those different channels. I also have a worksheet for that, a cheat sheet. So if you're interested in those, I'm more than happy to share that. But the idea is that I basically want to put my messaging in some of those channels, and I want to test whether or not I actually get feedback, clicks, interactions, comments on each of those channels, right? And so that's the idea there. That's the mechanism. And so what I'm looking for at this point is interaction and engagement. Is it liked? Is it shared? Is it commented on? That's if I'm using social media, right? If I'm doing public speaking, like how many people actually came to the event? How many people are signing up for follow-on contact? How many people ask questions? That kind of stuff, right? So each set of channels is actually going to have its own metrics. The good news is that it's pretty commonsensical. The idea is that as you're going through these things, what you want to do is say, okay, well, how can I measure my channel once I've finished, once I've decided on the channel? What kind of metrics am I going to use in order to see whether or not I want to continue exploring in that channel or not, right? Okay, so that's channels. Now let's look at this next in the hierarchy. This is purchasing behavior. So that says that, hey, my messaging is right. My channels, I got the channels right. Like, so for example, I'm going to talk about giving classes on testing, and I'm going to put this on Eventbrite, and people are going to show up and they're going to ask questions. They're going to willingly like be patient with me for at least the first 10 minutes of the class. And And then they're going to look at this yellow thing and then they're going to leave. Maybe, I don't know. Anyways, self-deprecating joke there. So anyways, the thing that I'm testing here in this yellow hierarchy is purchasing behavior. Like basically, once I get the messaging right, once I get the channel right, do they actually buy it? And so how do I test that? Well, I do that with what I like to call funnel testing. Funnel testing is basically stacking channels on top of each other until you get to a conversion, right? Just like a conversation, people start with general stuff that's safe, and eventually you get into like a heart-to-heart discussion, right? And that's sort of kind of how funnels work. You pitch a product, like that product statement, for example, and then people want to know more, and then they'll take the next step and they'll click on the next ad, or they'll click on the next thing. And then you say, hey, if you're interested in this, I'll give you a free widget. And they'll say, yeah, I want a free widget. And that's when you say, click here and give me your information. And then so it's basically like this step-by-step relationship that you're creating with somebody. And that's basically what a funnel is. So there's lots of information on funnels and how they work. It's basically, another word for this is like the quote sales process. So there's that, right? Okay. So that's the mechanism. So what are we going to actually test for? Like, what kind of numbers are we going to test for when we're looking for purchasing behavior? So we're going to look for how many people actually like convert into actual customers. How many people give us their information? How many people signal intent to buy with a particular behavior? And then really what we're trying to get to is, at the end of the day, will they buy it? Or will they take the next step that signals that, hey, I want to be in a customer provider relationship with you, right? So those are the things that we're looking for. Once we get that, then we can start looking at the usability of our product. I mean, we're building for people, right? So the usability thing is, we want to build functionality into it from the very beginning, right? But testing is something different. It's like saying, hey, we think this is in a configuration that will work for you, customer, but we don't know that it'll work until we actually watch them using it, right? And so that's what we're talking about here. So how we test for usability is, we usually put a simulation of the product, a prototype, a clickable prototype. It could be a cardboard box that has the quote features on it, or if it's a service, you can make something like, I like to use the game board concept. It's like mocking up a game board and then showing people like the little, like a Chutes and Ladders type game board, where you say, hey, here's your problem at point A, and point B is a solution where you get home, and these are all the steps in between is what we do for you. That kind of thing, right? And then you kind of watch people as they go through that. And so the idea here is that when we're testing for usability, we want to put a prototype in front of a customer and give them a task and see if they can complete it using the prototype that we've constructed. And if they can't, that's fine. That's data, because we need to know, right, on what improvements to make and that kind of stuff. So really what we're testing for is the ability of the customer to complete the task intuitively. In other words, complete the task without our intervention. And if we can get that right, that means that when the product is sitting on the shelf, or it's in the App Store, or somebody's signing up for service, they know how to self-serve. They know how to use it in order to get their problem solved, right? That's what we want to, that's what we're testing for there. Okay, so the final thing that we're going to test for in the hierarchy is the experience. Really what we're looking for here is, are we knocking the customer's socks off? Are we changing the game for the customer? And if we get this right, then all the other stuff is right, and we've got something that is just so fantastic that nobody wants to make it or use anything else, right? So how do we test for this? I like to use a customer journey map, which basically breaks down the experience for a customer step by step. I want to know what their emotions are during the whole time of them actually using this whole thing, before, during, and after their experience in identifying their problem, working with me to solve it, and then after telling everybody about it because it's so awesome, right? So that's really what a customer journey map does, or a customer experience map as well. So I think about it, but then I also want to observe a customer while they're actually interacting with the prototype. And then I want to make marks on that map to say, hey, was I right here? Was I not right? Was I right there? Was I not right? And then just kind of adjust as I kind of go. And really what I'm testing for here is, are they surprised and delighted? Like, are they just in love with this? Have I transmuted their problem and their like frustrating thing into a joy or experience of joy? That's what I'm looking for, right? If I want to make an awesome product. Okay, so that's pretty much the hierarchy. I forgot what my next. Okay, yeah, that was like we'll do an exercise. So, all right, so that's the hierarchy right there. Let me check the chat to see something. Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. So,
Dan,
yes, Laura.
did you want to take any questions about it? Or not?
I do. I would love to,
Okay.
and thank you for the prompt. Yes. So, does anyone have any questions about the testing hierarchy? I'll stop my share here. Okay, looks like, yes, Laura put the testing hierarchy in the chat there. Do we have any questions about that right now? Justin, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, what would be the recommended channels for testing for a SaaS, for SaaS?
Okay, so that's a great question. Yeah, I think we've
B2B SaaS specifically. Sorry.
B2B SaaS. Well, there's like 21 channels that I'm thinking of right now. Give me a quick second and I'm going to put a cheat sheet in the chat here, okay?
Okay.
All right. All right. Going through this. It's difficult. I can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at Nicholas's question in the chat. I'm not laughing at him. I'm laughing with him, because what if you're going through the hierarchy and you find your idea sucks?
I've been there.
You save a lot of money by stopping working on putting your money and time into that idea if it sucks.
Pivot. Is this that magical word pivot? Is that where it comes into?
Yeah, you can pivot, or you can move on to a completely different idea if pivot isn't appropriate. At least that's my 2 cents.
Let me go. Yeah, almost there. I'm looking at the worksheets here. This is traction. Okay. All right, Justin. I'm okay. Now I have it pulled up as well, so you can see it. Okay, so there's basically right here. There's 20 channels that you'll see on that cheat sheet. And you know what? Why don't I just go ahead and share this on the screen, so we're all looking at the same thing. Here we go. Okay, so here's the idea, is that okay? There's only 20 channels on here. The one that's missing is audio. And the reason why there's 20 and there's one missing is because it wasn't going to look right. So I omitted it. Anyways, so when we think about like LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok and all those kind of things, right? Those are only one channel. And we're going to call those existing platforms down here. So that just kind of gives you an idea of like the scope of the channels. So this is a pretty broad scope, basically. So we have blog, publicity stunts, SEO, SEM. These are basically ads, right? Social media ads. This is making something that's useful, like a tool or an infographic or something. Business development is basically just, it's kind of like lightweight sales. Sales is going to people. Affiliate is testing whether or not like a product will work and people are actually interested in it. We talked about existing platforms. Offline ads, that's old school. SEO, we talked about that. Content marketing is, content and watching people interact with it. email newsletters, building viral loops, which is actually, there's a formula for it that he talks about in the book, or you can find it online. But it's something that you can dial in. Trade shows, offline events, like a mini conference, speaking engagements, community building, or influencers, right? So the question was, what would be good for a SaaS? And the answer is, well, I don't know. You'd have to test. But my initial thought is I'm betting that blog articles might be good insofar as they would be collateral that you would post on Reddit somewhere, or like an existing, basically like an existing channel or existing platform, right? Forums, that kind of stuff. Because what folks might be looking for initially, or, like, depending on your customer, maybe I'm just in my head, I have like, maybe it's an IT customer, right? And they're trying to solve a problem. And, you don't have to know everything when you're in IT. You just have to know how to Google, right? Or you have to be teachable, or know how to search and fix like that. So I would say that probably finding out where the existing platforms are that those folks actually do look for questions and answers, writing collateral that would like document like a particular problem or a case, having that parked there, and then maybe that would lead to a website where people can sign up to ask more questions, or they can contact you or something like that, right? So those would be my initial thoughts on what what some of those channels might look like for a SaaS, Justin. Does anybody have any other questions?
I don't see any.
Okay. So Nicholas or Nick, you're like, hey, oh, slow down. Is there something that I can revisit for you?
No, sorry. I was actually looking at the reactions on there, and I thought that was to open up more emojis, and it was actually speed up. I was not trying to tell you to speed up. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good. You're good. Okay. All right. Okay. So that is the hierarchy of tests, right? So what I'd like you to do is think about what are some of those categories that you can think of. So we listed out uncertainties, right? We say, okay, well, I'm not certain that there's demand for what I have yet, or I'm not really sure how to distill things into a different use case. So my question, for example, right? So my question to you would be then is which of those testing categories do you think would be right to test first before anything else? So let me look at the clock here. It's 12:35. And what I'd like to do is get to the last one. So we could just discuss this briefly. Can anybody have any questions about like where they might fit or what they might do on that testing hierarchy? Because then we'll talk about we'll talk about how to set a test up.
What was the question again, Dan?
The question was, keeping in mind those uncertainties that we identified in the beginning of our time together today, which category of testing would serve to mitigate those uncertainties? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I can do an example for me. How about this? I'll just do an example. You guys can think about like how it applies to you, and then we'll go into how to actually set up a test next. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So, oh, hold on a second. Let me see here. Yeah. Thank you, Laura. All right. So let's say I have a podcast, and the podcast has, and since 2019, let's say it's gotten 450,000 downloads. And let's say that I've interacted with people that are listening to the podcast. Let's say that I wanted to turn the podcast into a book. Before I do that, like the podcast is already done. All the episodes are done, all of that. And people have maybe indicated to me that okay, it's not a hypothetical situation. This is a legit situation. So I have a podcast, it has downloads, and I'm wondering, hey, because I didn't monetize the podcast on purpose, but I'm wondering, hey, can I turn this into a book? And so my uncertainty around all of this is, okay, so I have this listening audience and I have data to support the fact that people are interested in the subject, they're interested in the title because they click on it and they stick around, right? So my question is, well, if I turn that into a text or a book, will people buy it? So I'm uncertain about that because the podcast is free. Will people pay for the information? So my uncertainty around messaging might be, okay, so the title is great for listeners. Would the title be great for readers? Does the logo work for readers? And so what I would want to do is think about my messaging category. And so how would I test whether or not I had the right message for people to actually buy a book? Well, to test that out, I might go to some of the people that have emailed me and said, thanks for the podcast. And I might say, hey, I have a book out. Like I might simulate it, right? I might say, hey, I have a book. It's on this. You can buy it here. And just like a fake link, right? And when they get to the link, I could say, hey, out of stock right now, like sign up to be on the waiting list or something. I could do that. I also could do some other things, but the idea is that I want to test messaging first. And I actually want to test like intent to buy, right? Would this be something that somebody are interested in? Once I have the book, I understand that maybe the channels might look not the same as the podcast. Because right now, the way the podcast gets listens is it's based on a recommendation engine. So I don't have that for a book. I'd have to be starting all over again. And so I might want to do some channel testing there. And that's just to begin. That's probably what I would think about. Like as I got the messaging right, as I got the channels right, I'd probably just pause, do it until I got it right, and then keep going with the thing. And then, to answer Nick's question from previous comment would be like, hey, if I find out that any one of these doesn't work, I'm done. I can either change it up and keep working with customers to get them what they want, or I could just stop and work on something else. Like I'm not going to stop being an entrepreneur. I'm not going to stop having ideas or wanting to serve people. It's just the form factor will change, right? Okay, so that's my example for how I would put some of these things into these categories. Now let's talk about actually how I'm going to actually set up a test. So I have my uncertainty list. I have those categories and I have an idea of like what those tests might be. But okay, well now how am I going to actually run a test? What's that going to look like? Well, lucky for us, we have an algorithm. And also lucky for us, we've kind of already done number one and number two. Yay. Now we just need to do the rest of it. Okay, let me check the chat before we get in through here. Okay, thank you, Laura. All right. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do when we set up a test, we want to identify uncertainty. So we've already been doing this. We've already been setting up a test and we haven't even known it. So congratulations, you're awesome. This is where we're at. Okay, the second thing that we want to do is we want to kind of revisit that hierarchy and see which category we're in, which you've done as well. So we're good. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to document what our assumption is. We want to document for our own notes, and I'll zoom in on this. We want to document what it is that we want to test, and the reason is because it gets super confusing. Like, and sometimes for me, what's happened is the test actually changes without me knowing about it. Right? It's sort of like that. Hey, I'm looking for a kid eating a bowl of Fruit Loops, and then I go on to unsplash.com or Pexels. I start looking through pictures, and I see an adult eating Fruit Loops, and that's not quite what I want, but I keep going, and then I see a panda bear eating bamboo shoots, and then after that I see a meme, and I think that's funny, and by the time I'm like, I stop and I realize that, hey, wait a minute, like watching a person like fall off a fence and get their pants ripped off, that's not the person that I was looking for. I was looking for a kid eating a bowl of Fruit Loops, right? So the rabbit hole. So that thing happens, that really happens like when you're doing tests, if you don't write it down, right? And that's the whole idea, is to avoid distraction. Just take a snapshot at the very beginning, and we can do that using something called a test card. So let me show you what that test card looks like. This is what it looks like. And you can get this, I think Laura, if she hasn't already, has this, and she'll drop it in the chat. This comes from a company called Strategizer, and it's just a fill in the blank type card. So really what we're doing is we're saying, okay, this is the test that we're going to do it, and this is who's doing it, and this is what we think. So I can fill out with my example, like for Dan. I think that people are going to buy the book version of the podcast. And to verify that, I'm going to conduct a messaging test. And so I'm going to do this one card per test, right? I'm going to conduct a messaging test. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate a link where people can buy the book. So I'm going to measure the amount of people that actually click on the link, number one. And then two, I'm going to measure if anybody actually gets to a place where they're acting like they're going to buy it. And then I'm correct about this if 50% of the people decide that they want to buy a book. And that's my test. That's what I'm going to do, right? That's how I'm going to set it up. So the test card really just helps us, plan out like how we're going to execute a test and how we're going to, the key thing is just say, okay, I'm going to test this uncertainty, but it's based on an assumption. And this is my assumption right here. And I want to challenge that assumption. This is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to measure it. And I'm going to be right if this is the case. And if I'm not right, then this other thing will be the case, right? Okay. So that's the card. And once we fill it out, then it's time to execute. And so we run the test. And what's running the test mean? Well, it means like acting as if we have a product, acting as if we have a message, acting as if we have the thing, sticking it out there and watching behavior. That's the key thing, right? We're watching people interact and behave with our thing. And as we watch, we'll say, hey, the test was successful because it showed us whether we knew, it showed us that we were either right or wrong about it. And that's a good test, right? A bad test is like, well, the results are inconclusive. So then we have to like rebuild the test until we actually start getting a definitive yes or no on whether or not we're building the right thing to test, right? Okay, so the final step in the algorithm is recording the result. And the reason why we want to do this is because, our tests are kind of hierarchical in nature. We want to say, hey, well, the messaging test passed, the usability test didn't. Well, what's in between there? And what tests do we conduct in between that? How do we get from messaging to channels to funnels to usability, right? If there's a problem somewhere in the chain, we need to know where that was. And so that's why we record right here. Because we can always come back and say, okay, well, look, this is the second card that we have available for you. This is called the learning card. And it basically said, you just match this up with the previous one. And you say, okay, well, here's what we thought. And based on what we thought, this is what we did. And this is what we saw people doing. Like they either clicked on the link or they didn't click on the link. And then from that, we learned that, well, maybe email wasn't the best way to do this. Like we put this in a Facebook group instead, and we got way more clicks on in the Facebook group than we did on the emails. So from that, we learned that people engage more in Facebook groups than they do in emails. Okay, so therefore, moving forward, if this is a messaging test, I'm going to say, okay, well, moving forward, I'm going to put more messages in Facebook to see if I'm hitting engagement in that particular platform, right? So basically here what I'm doing is I'm documenting what's working, what's not working, and how are my assumptions changing and how are my next actions going to change based on what I learned, right? Okay, so that's how to set up a test. I would like to stop my screen share for a moment here and check in with everybody. Okay. Yeah. Would you mind giving me a quick second? I just need to look at my notes to make sure that we're on track here.
I can talk while you're doing that.
Thanks, Laura.
So, yeah, so after this workshop, if you registered via Eventbrite, I'll send you an email that includes a PDF link, or actually I'm going to, the PDF link to a combined version of the slides. And then actually, Leslie, I can share that link with you right now as well.
Thank you.
Leslie kept crashing when she was trying to download the PDFs.
Oh no.
So,
Yeah. Where there's a will, there's a way. I'm like, I'm coming back.
There you go.
So you must be doing something right, Dan.
Okay, that's I will take that as observable behavior. Thank you, Leslie.
There you go.
Okay, I'm posting the link and I'll share it with you later. That'll take you to a Google Drive where you can download it. Shouldn't crash your computer, hopefully.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm reoriented to the notes, and thank you, Laura, and thanks Leslie for sticking with us then. Okay, so that's the how to set up a test, and so what we've covered so far today is we've looked at uncertainties. We've looked at, well, how do I mitigate some of those uncertainties? And I can do that with a hierarchy test, right? Or just assigning a category to, is this a messaging uncertainty? Is this a channel uncertainty? Is it a funnel uncertainty, a usability uncertainty, that kind of thing, right? And so once I know that, I know what to test for, and I know what I'm supposed to test for first before I go to the next thing. And then we also had a look at, well, okay, well, how, now that I know what I don't know, and now that I know what I want to do to try to figure that out, how do I actually go about doing that? And we saw that there's basically this little algorithm we can do. And it's all about identifying what we just don't know, what we want to test, writing down what we think, what assumption we want to challenge, right? What we're testing for, running the test, and then recording the result. And so that's kind of the whole thing that I wanted to impart today, was basically how to change that, how to transmute that uncertainty into something that's actually usable, that provides direction for us as entrepreneurs. So at this point, we have about 5 minutes before Laura wraps up the session for us. I would like to open it up to see what you're thinking about, what kind of questions folks might have, or, challenges to the whole thing. I'm down with that too. So
yeah, and you can take a little more time. I'll do a fast wrap up. It's less important than what you're sharing.
Okay. Well, thank you, Laura.
I have a question, Dan.
Yes, Leslie, go ahead.
I have tons and tons of research validating exactly what I know people are wanting. However, getting to them is difficult. So they are senior level people. They're very easy to find on LinkedIn, chief sustainability officers and chief human resources officers. So, and I have 19,000 followers and whatever. So I know how to do this with a marketing and sales background of 27 years. I got that part. The issue, and of course, then with the messaging, I've been in marketing, I've been writing, testing, etc. The challenge is how you get them. And I've been told by other people with this whole testing business ideas, oh, it's just about the persistence. And I do know that as a salesperson, but lots of them don't reply. Mm-hmm. Even some that are connected to me, and I know I'm busy, and I've had that happen, and it'll be like 5 days before I reply or whatnot. So and then some will, and just basically asking for 15 minutes, can I run a few ideas by you, and just this is what I'm looking to do, validate this assumption. and basically ask for that amount of time. Not saying I want to sell you, but the questions themselves have sales built into them. So if they're not doing X and I'm asking about their X, that will prompt them to go, I wonder why she's asking me how I'm folding sustainability into my human resource function. And so by asking that, they're going to go, we're not doing that. Maybe I should talk to this person. So, I mean, and I know it's a numbers game, but I just thought I'd throw it out there, see if you have any. These are big ticket sales, mostly big companies, but there's a whole bunch of mid-size. So I've been changing that up. I've been choosing the smaller companies, the mid-size and the large ones, but that's what I'm doing. And so any ideas welcome.
I mean, I'm probably, thanks for asking that, Leslie. I probably might echo everybody else. The one thing that I would think about is that, well, okay, so, or the thing that's coming initially to mind is there's a bunch of different people with a bunch of different problems, right? And like separating those out is like super challenging, but also super necessary. And then the next question is, well, how do I do that? Well,
I've got a couple so far. So
great.
I know the problem. So with the human resource people, it's an attraction and retention issue because most of them don't know it, but 36% of the millennial and Gen Z population will not take a job or stay at a job if they find out the company's doing something bad for the planet. So it's, are you having attraction and retention issues in your HR department due to sustainability? And so a lot of them, they won't know that. And so they'll go, I wonder if I am. Maybe I should talk to this woman. So the question is kind of a speed bump and hopefully getting them to take action. And then on the other part, on the CSO part, there's a ton, and it all has to do with attraction and retention of customers, employees, partners, suppliers, and investors. And so just crafting that sentence. And I'm trying different sizes of customers, by saying, okay, I'm going to pick these that are mid-sized companies. I'm going to pick those that are smaller sized companies, these enterprise people that I'm connected with. So the thoughts.
Well, I don't know. It sounds like you're doing it right. It just time and observation and continuing to do it. Like, I don't have a magic bullet. I don't.
Well, that's good. I mean, at least I got validation from you. So that's good. I mean, we're proving the validation right here, right now in real time. I got your validation. So maybe I just keep going.
Nicholas had a good point in the chat about offering, what are you offering people in return for giving you feedback? So,
these are high level people. So it's not like I can give them a tchotchke. They're not used to that kind of thing. And of course,
it doesn't have to be a tchotchke. Maybe you offer them a white paper that anonymizes and combines the information you learned, something like that. But, I mean, I'm not saying that's what you do, but
that's actually a good idea, because I can say these are the top things that many organizations are challenged on regarding sustainability. And what the heck, they get it. That's actually a good idea. I like that. Thank you, Nicholas.
You're welcome.
I wanted to toss an idea out there.
Go ahead, Justin. Yeah.
My background is in executive recruiting, so I am one of the individuals, one of thousands.
Wait, we've got that.
Justin, you got
Justin.
the feedback.
Yeah, we got the feedback again, Justin. While he fixes his, okay. Talk some more.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. I just wanted to make sure you guys heard me twice, because I think that right. As an executive recruiter, I am one of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who are flooding people like your inboxes with trying to figure out if I can do business development. One way that I have found is very effective is to get an introduction with somebody else within either the same sphere or within the same company. If you, let's say, if you have traction with somebody and if you have traction and success with somebody, I would say to utilize that relationship to introduce you to somebody else within their network.
Thank you. I'm doing it on LinkedIn. I'm telling you, it's like, I think it's just about the persistence. Yeah. Because I mean, I've got all those 19,000. So it's like, looking out, see who knows who. And most people like me, if somebody asks me to say, they look up and I say, I see you're connected to whatever. So Justin, if you said to me, I see you're connected to whatever, would you make an introduction? And I've had people say, well, do you know them well? It doesn't have to be about that. I just say, hey, this guy's got something you might like. You have something, and put them together, Yeah.
So thanks for that. We're going to wrap up. Dan, maybe you could share if I know you just put your email address in the chat, but if people want to go over any more of this with you, do you answer questions? Should they just email you, or what's the best way?
So there's a couple of different ways. Thank you. Yeah, you can email me there. If you're interested in working together on a one-on-one basis, you can go to the MetroBusinessCenter.org. Those are the folks that I work for currently. I'm a small business advisor there, and basically what we do is we just kind of work to answer your questions. I can help you think through some of those things, kind of like what we did today. Or if I can't answer your question, we've got other consultants on staff that can. And so if you sign up there and just say, hey, yeah, I want to work with Dan, or I want to work with somebody else on this particular thing, then that's a good way to do that then.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to walk us through just a closeout. If you're short for time, I posted all the links to what I'm going to talk about in the chat. And there's a little secret on Zoom. If you don't know it, in the chat box, there's like 3 little dots. And if you click on those 3 little dots, there's an option to save the chat. So you can save the chat and then you'll have all the links. Plus, I'm going to email you what some follow-up stuff. And this video will be available probably not till next week. So we'll post a video on our website and send you a link. Also, you'll have to scroll through the long chat I just did about looking at past office hours sessions on the StartupSac website. I wanted to let you know about some upcoming events. On Tuesday, August 31st, we have a monthly event in partnership with the Carlson Center called Startup Happy Hour. And we interview, like a fireside chat style interview, with an accomplished CEO. And this month, it's the CEO of Engage3. So that will be on video, although in the fall, we're hoping to come back in person with those. Then another in-person event is happening in Roseville on August 25th. The Growth Factory is having an event called GFX. So it'll be an all-afternoon event that will focus on startups. There'll be a lot of investors there, a lot of breakout sessions. So I encourage you to go to that. And then I know some of you are 1 Million Cups regular attendees. Join us every Wednesday morning between 9 and 10. 2 startup companies present their businesses to an audience of their peers for advice and feedback. And if you are a founder, we'd love to have you be one of those presenters. So you can reach out to me and I can tell you more about that, or you can just go to that 1 Million Cups link that I posted earlier and apply to present. Also invite you to sign up for the Startup Digest, and it's actually a new link. So if you already get the Startup Digest, you don't need to re-sign up again. Everything's been ported over. It's going to look different coming on Monday. And that comes out every Monday morning, and it's the roundup of the best events for startup founders in the greater Sacramento region. And then lastly, there's something called the Startup World Cup. And this year, there is going to be a competition in Sacramento to qualify for the Startup World Cup. You need to apply by no later than August 22nd. 10 startups will be selected to be in the World Cup Sacramento event, which is on August 30th. And then someone will advance from there to the Startup World Cup finals that are happening in the Bay Area. And the winner of the Bay Area competition, or the world competition happening in the Bay Area, will get $1 million in investment. So that's all I've got. I'll go ahead and open it up if anyone has any parting remarks that they'd like to make. Okay, so Sri, you had your hand raised. Did you want to ask something?
Yeah, so I have seen that Startup World Cup. So what is the entry eligibility into that program?
Well, you'd need to live here because it's an in-person event. So to compete, you'd need to be in the greater Sacramento region. They really didn't have much eligibility requirements on the site. So let me post it again. You have to submit an application and a pitch deck, and then they will pick the startups from that. I think the only requirement, I think you have to be a legal entity, a company, basically. Can't just be an idea.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Was that the one, Laura, in that said you have to be opening a retail business in Sacramento, or was that a totally different one?
No, that's something completely different. That's the annual Calling All Dreamers competition that the Downtown Sacramento Partnership holds. But the Startup World Cup is part of a global startup competition. So we have, I guess I'll call it a heat here in Sacramento for the very first time. Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Anyone else have a question? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and close it out. I want to say a big thank you to Dan. Dan put so much energy and love into our startup community here. So if you've never had a one-on-one meeting with Dan, I recommend it. He also teaches a couple of other programs, including the Lean Innovator, which is a partnership between the MetroBusiness Center and the Carlson Center. And they just started a new cohort. But if you missed that, look for the next one, which I imagine will be starting in a few months. So, or maybe first of the year. All right.
Yeah, the first of the year.
First of the year. All right. Well, you all have a great afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. And you know, it's super cool. Nobody dropped out. Everybody stayed.
Wow.
There's validation for you, Dan.
Yeah. I mean, hey, you know, that's yeah.
All right.
Hasn't always happened.
Yeah. I'm going to close this out now. Bye, everyone.
Bye, folks. Thank you.
Bye.